Anthony Joshua's gigantic. He's so big. He's so much bigger. Bro, he got hit with a bomb and breaks his jaw in 2 places. Don't do this very long, because there's a price that you pay that is not worth it.
Listen, let's cut straight to the real talk here. Jake Paul got absolutely flatlined, and his boxing career is anything even remotely legitimate? That's done. Finished, buried. We need to break down what that moment actually means for his future, because this isn't just another loss we're analyzing. This is a career-ending reality check that changed everything. All it took was one night, one opponent who belonged at that level, and the entire illusion shattered in front of millions.
One punch to completely ruin your life.
Jake Paul retired the only way boxing ever forces the truth out of someone, whether they're ready to admit it or not. December 19th, 2025, Kaseya Center in Miami, broadcast live on Netflix for the entire world to witness. This was sold as real heavyweight boxing with real professional rules and real consequences that you can't edit out or spin into viral content later. And here's where it gets absolutely brutal, because once Anthony Joshua dropped him repeatedly throughout that fight and shattered his jaw in not one but 2 places, retirement immediately stopped being some hypothetical discussion topic. It became the only logical outcome, the only path forward that makes any medical, professional, or rational sense whatsoever. The sport made the decision for him.
The big win for him would be that he was even willing to do it, and that he could do well for a little bit. Yeah, and then eventually just deal with the fact that...
Let me break down exactly what happened in that ring, because these details are crucial to understanding why this is so final, so devastating, so impossible to come back from. Anthony Joshua knocked him down 4 separate times, twice in the 5th round. Boom. Boom, canvas, get up, survive. Then twice again in the 6th round before the referee mercifully stepped in and saved him from further damage. That sequence matters enormously, and here's why. This was not a flash knockdown where you get caught by one lucky punch and the commentators can say, oh, he just didn't see it coming. This was not some fluke moment you explain away with bad timing or a slip on the canvas. No, this was repeated, systematic, methodical breakdown under pressure. This was a fighter being dismantled piece by piece, stage by stage, until the referee had absolutely no choice left but to stop it for his own safety. And you need to understand something critical here, something that separates real boxing from spectacle. Retirement stops being a joke or a punchline or Twitter speculation when you literally cannot protect yourself anymore inside that ring.
Style that would align with a ring that size, a negative style as we mentioned. It really comes down to the fan interest. Jake Paul is on a 2-fight stretch coming into this one, which really put his reputation on the line.
Then came the injury that permanently changed the entire conversation, the moment where this stopped being about pride or records or comeback narratives and became about survival. We're talking about a confirmed double jaw fracture, broken on both sides of his face. Think about what that actually means in real terms. Immediate transport to the hospital, no post-fight press conference because he physically could not speak. His mouth would not function properly enough to form coherent words. Emergency surgery followed almost immediately. Then came the liquid diet that lasted weeks. Then the wires holding his jaw together while the bones desperately tried to heal. And at that point in the story, retirement isn't about emotion anymore. It's not about wounded pride or what fans are saying in comment sections. It becomes medical. It becomes a decision that doctors and surgeons are making based on structural damage to your skull, not something you can hype your way out of or promote your way past with clever marketing.
Next month. Don't do this very long, because there's a price that you pay that is not worth it. It's not worth it. And that price is depression, deep depression, a severe brain imbalance that's going to lead you to addiction.
Before the fight, what was he selling to everyone who would listen? Invincibility, confidence, swagger, the idea that he belonged in that ring and could compete at the elite level. But after the fight ended, after reality delivered its brutal verdict, he was counting recovery weeks, like a patient, swallowing his meals through a straw because his jaw couldn't handle solid food, dealing with the kind of harsh reality that no amount of social media spin or clever editing can fix or hide. You cannot talk your way out of structural damage to bone. You cannot market your way out of fractures that require surgical intervention and months of recovery. This is where retirement stops being hypothetical, where it stops being this abstract thing people debate online. This is where it becomes the only realistic option left on the table, whether you want to admit it or not.
In his boxing career. How old is Jake Paul?
He'll be 29 and
Look at that. So he's 28 years old. 29 next month.
When a fighter leaves the ring unable to speak, unable to eat solid food, unable to deny or downplay the level of damage his body just absorbed in front of millions, the sport itself makes the decision for him. The conversation around Jake Paul changed forever that night in Miami because his own body answered the question louder and more definitively than any promoter or manager or hype video ever could. There's no spinning broken bone. There's no narrative that fixes structural failure.
It leads so many people to impulsive behavior. So many people become gambling addicts, drug addicts.
The boxing world did not hesitate for even a second after that fight ended, and I mean they came out swinging with opinions immediately. Former champions, respected analysts, commentators who have been around the sport for decades. They all went straight for the truth without sugarcoating a single word. They called it a mismatch from the opening bell. They called him exposed at the highest level. Some went even further and said his career was completely done, finished, no path back, no redemption arc possible. And here's what stood out to me about the reaction from the boxing community. The tone was not emotional or bitter or personal revenge. It was corrective. Like the sport was finally clearing its throat after years of being forced into politeness, years of pretending that celebrity boxing and real professional boxing existed on the same plane or deserved the same respect.
Just everything that's happened in my life, like I was taking L's after L, and I just mean that in that sense. I don't mean it just by like success.
Duke McKenzie, former world champion who knows the technical side inside and out, laid it out cleanly and brutally, without any drama or exaggeration. Jake lunged with his punches instead of snapping them properly, with technique. His balance completely collapsed under pressure every single time Joshua applied it. He stumbled over his own feet trying to reset position like a beginner. He reached upward with his shots and missed repeatedly because he was simply too short to reach Joshua cleanly without overextending and leaving himself dangerously exposed. Every single technical flaw that had been carefully masked against smaller opponents, older opponents, compromised opponents, was dragged into harsh, unforgiving daylight all at once on that massive stage.
Jake Paul tried to throw a shot, he would lunge in, jump in, and because he was so short, he'd miss. And then he ended up stumbling over his feet and falling over. Sometimes in that fight, he reminded me of, have you seen that Kung Fu film called The Drunken Master?
Michael Bisping, former UFC champion who knows what real combat looks like at the highest level, focused his analysis on something else entirely, and honestly it was almost worse in a way. He focused on restraint. Anthony Joshua did not need to be reckless in that fight. He didn't need to chase or take risks or go for highlight reel moments to impress the crowd. He just let his power and patience do all the work for him, and it was terrifying to watch. And here's the most damning part of Bisping's breakdown, the part that hurt the most. Jake never once worried him, not for a single moment. No wobble, no panic, no moment where Joshua had to change his game plan or respect Jake's power or adjust his strategy. The difference in class and skill level stayed painfully, brutally obvious from the opening bell all the way through to the stoppage, and everyone watching could feel it.
You know, when you're young, you think that you could live forever and you think that you're invincible until something happens. We all saw it happen to Muhammad Ali. So there's a deeper story here, is that life's a marathon, not a sprint. So whether it's fighting, whether it's your lifestyle, whether it's money, you're going to be 30, you're going to be 40, you're going to be 50, and PBD, you snap your fingers, boom. Just like that, you're going to be 60.
Analysts across the board leaned heavily on the numbers after the fight because numbers don't care about hype or narratives or social media followings or promotional budgets. Joshua landed 48 clean punches throughout the fight. Jake landed 16. Let me repeat that so it sinks in. That is not competitiveness. That is not he hung in there. That is survival math. That is one fighter trying desperately just make it out alive without permanent brain damage. Joshua never had to overextend himself, never had to gamble or take dangerous chances. He just waited patiently, adjusted his timing like a sniper, and the collapse came right on schedule, exactly when everyone with real experience predicted it would.
And at a certain, like that one that he got from Joshua, ooh, you know, say if you have like a punch card, you have like so many punches that you can get in your life, which I believe you do.
The framing of the entire conversation changed instantly after those numbers came out, after the statistical breakdown made denial impossible. This was no longer a debate about boxing ability or potential, or whether Jake Paul had improved over the years. It became a simple, uncomfortable, brutal question. How long could Jake physically survive in a ring with an elite heavyweight before his body gave out entirely? The conversation stopped being about wins and losses and legacy building, and it shifted to whether he ever belonged in that ring to begin with, whether this whole experiment was doomed from the start, a spectacle pretending to be sport.
16, but doesn't even have abs, right? At 216, he could easily weigh 190.
Yeah.
I'm sure he could make 190.
Yeah.
Anthony Joshua's gigantic. So big. He's so big. He's so much.
The game plan Jake Paul used told the truth long before the knockout ever landed, and if you understand boxing at all, you could see it immediately from round 1. They used an oversized 22-foot ring, which is huge by modern boxing standards, specifically designed to create distance. Constant backward movement throughout every single round, north to south, running instead of the lateral footwork that actual elite boxers use to control space and dictate pace. This was not ring generalship or octagon control. This was evacuation with gloves on. Clinching became the default reaction to any pressure. Wrestling tactics inside a boxing ring, leaning on Joshua, grabbing, holding, collapsing into the referee whenever physically possible. Analysts didn't call it clever or strategic game planning. They called it exactly what it was: desperation. You clinch when you are completely outmatched and buying seconds, not when you're executing a confident, winning game plan. The problem, and people pointed this out immediately across every platform, is that there was no visible attempt at any point to actually win rounds on the scorecards. No sustained combinations, no pressure sequences, no moments where he tried to impose his will or take control. Everything in his approach pointed to one single objective only: avoid catastrophic damage, stretch the fight out as long as possible, make it look respectable enough that people don't laugh at the spectacle. The optics were absolutely brutal to watch unfold in real time. A heavyweight boxing bout reduced to evasive survival theater. Commentators openly mocked what they were watching live because it was impossible not to. This was a man running for credibility, not running toward victory, and the consensus hardened quickly across the entire sport and stayed there like concrete. This approach confirmed what everyone suspected going in. Jake KW, he couldn't win. He was there to endure, collect the check, and escape with his health intact. And eventually, even that last part failed catastrophically.
There's a clip of you on the ground after hitting you say, wow.
Can someone start posting content?
Joe Rogan said what everyone else in the combat sports world was tiptoeing around, and he did not bother to dress it up or soften the message for feelings. He called the fight a brutal reality check and told Jake Paul directly, publicly, to retire. Not someday down the line, not after one more payday or one more comeback fight for redemption. Now, immediately. And Rogan wasn't reacting as some keyboard warrior or hater with an agenda, or someone clout chasing. He was reacting as someone who has watched fighters up close for decades. Someone who has seen what they pay for that damage decades later when the cameras are off, the money is gone, and the consequences become impossible to ignore.
You put your teeth back in when they pop out like that, or are they gone?
Rogan specifically talked about eating nothing but protein shakes through a straw because your jaw is wired shut for 6 weeks straight, and he made it absolutely clear this isn't just an inconvenience you push through. He talked about cumulative brain trauma like it was a ticking time bomb, because in combat sports it absolutely is. Every concussion ADDs up over time like interest on a loan you can never repay. Every heavy shot you take subtracts something from your brain that you never get back. Not with rest, not with treatment, not with money, not with anything. That one punch from Anthony Joshua wasn't just a single mark on a scorecard that you move past and forget. Rogan described it bluntly as the equivalent of multiple concussions delivered in one single catastrophic moment. One hit that eats through years of accumulated tolerance and protection your brain might have had left.
Is that 96 million or whatever worth you having brain damage for the rest of your life? And this is the thing, that this is, to me, besides the Tyson Fury's brother, you're going up against a real fighter. This guy, if that boxer punches you in the face in the street, that's assault with a deadly weapon. He's a trained...
The jaw fracture became the symbol that everyone needed to finally stop pretending this was okay or sustainable for any amount of money. Doctors and analysts made it absolutely clear this was not just a facial injury you ice down and forget about in a few weeks. When your jaw breaks on both sides, the force behind that impact doesn't politely stop at the bone and call it a day. It transfers inward through your skull like a shockwave. Head trauma doesn't announce itself with a dramatic headline the next day or a hospital report. It shows up years later as memory loss, emotional instability, depression, impulse control problems that seem completely unrelated to fighting. Rogan talked openly and seriously about fighters sliding into addiction after careers full of hits just like that one. Gambling, drugs, alcohol, self-medication for pain and mental health issues they don't even recognize as connected. He said no amount of money is worth that bill when it comes due, and he meant it with every word.
In his lower jaw.
Oh, you can jaw.
Psychologists and body language experts went even further with their analysis after the fight, and honestly, it was uncomfortable to watch them break it down frame by frame. They analyzed Jake's final moments in the ring with surgical precision. The eyes, the posture, the hesitation before exchanges, the body language that couldn't lie. They described fear, exhaustion, and helplessness, and they weren't talking about height fear or promotional fear for the cameras. They meant real threat detection, the kind where your body knows it is completely outmatched before your conscious mind catches up and accepts it. They talked about how cornered he looked, how his movements stopped being tactical or strategic and started being purely instinctual survival mode. That wasn't calculated strategy anymore. That was survival panic, and everyone watching could see it written all over him.
It's not
enough.
It's not enough.
Yeah.
Because in so many of his fights, like the Nate Diaz fight, he gets tired in the later rounds. In the beginning, look,
And through all of it, every single analysis kept coming back to the same point over and over, like a drumbeat that wouldn't stop. Money does not undo brain damage. A wired jaw does not protect your memory 5 years from now when the real consequences appear. A big check does not rebuild neurons or reverse trauma or fix what's broken inside your skull. Rogan said the quiet part out loud that people avoid saying in public. This is exactly how careers end badly, when people refuse to listen to reality until reality forces the issue with violence.
Like, that's a killer. This is a weapon. So is it worth the money? I don't think any money is worth that. The brain, like...
While experts were talking seriously about health and long-term consequences and medical reality, the internet went absolutely feral with reactions that spread like wildfire. The tone flipped fast. Disbelief turned into celebration. Relief turned into ruthless ridicule. Memes flooded every timeline within minutes. Clips replayed endlessly on loop across every platform. People weren't just reacting to a loss or a knockout in isolation. They were reacting to years of marketing and hype finally colliding violently with physics and reality in the most brutal way possible. Jake Paul, the boxer, faded into the background almost immediately after that fight, like he never existed. Jake Paul, the promoter, took center stage, and that's what people started focusing on. Salesman, showman, viral engine, content creator who happens to box sometimes when the money's right. Analysts said he sells spectacle better than he sells actual skill, and honestly, that might have been survivable if he just accepted it and leaned into that role completely. What made it unbearable for people, what crossed the line, was pretending the spectacle was the same thing as victory, or legitimacy, or belonging at the elite level. The puncher's chance argument that his fans kept desperately using got absolutely shredded publicly by anyone with real experience. Experts called it pure fantasy, wishful thinking disconnected from reality. You do not get a puncher's chance against an Olympic-level heavyweight champion who knows exactly what's coming and how to avoid it with decades of experience. That logic works in bars and backyard myths and YouTube comment sections, not in professional rings with real consequences and elite competition. When you're facing someone like Anthony Joshua, size, timing, and experience erase fairy tales fast. As retirement talk spread like wildfire across social media and sports news, Jake's own messaging made everything worse and more contradictory. One minute he was joking about fighting again in just days like nothing happened. The next minute he was posting updates from surgery, liquid diet, stiffness, pain, wired jaw, swelling, recovery timelines. The contradiction was glaring and impossible to ignore for anyone paying attention. You cannot sell invincibility while simultaneously counting recovery weeks and posting hospital photos with tubes in your face. Analysts started predicting what everyone with sense already understood. This is not a short break before the comeback. This is a long pause at absolute best, and a quiet retirement at worst. The injury alone demands serious time away. The lack of viable opponents who make sense financially and competitively demands even more. There is no clean path back to credibility after a loss like this, combined with that level of documented visible damage. Behind the scenes, the conversation turns even colder, and this is the part people don't see publicly. Sponsors start looking at risk instead of reach. Promoters look at liability instead of views and engagement. Broadcasters look at medical charts and legal exposure instead of pay-per-view projections and subscriber numbers. The fun stops when the product starts looking fragile and unpredictable in the wrong way. When insurance becomes impossible. When insurance companies start asking serious questions, when the cost of another fight starts outweighing the profit margin, that's when retirements happen quietly, without dramatic announcements, just a slow fade into other projects and business ventures until nobody's even asking about the boxing anymore.